Now that we've had a few days to let the news of Roe versus Wade kind of breathe a little bit, new questions are coming up about what U.S. companies can and can't do to cover workers' abortion costs. And joining us on 710 KURV, we welcome back to the program an undefeated trial attorney with more than 120 state and federal cases successfully litigated, Sandra Spurgeon from the Spurgeon Law Group, joining us on the 956 drive home. So what are some of the legal concerns here about workers covering the companies covering workers' abortion costs?
Well, I think that in Texas, we had 14 GOPs today who said, listen, companies, for those of you that are in Texas, reverse that decision, reverse your policies or else. It says that, I was just reading it right before we went on, they intend to introduce laws that will penalize those companies. And, right now, Texas has a 6-week, had the 6-week abortion ban waiting for the Roe v. Wade decision. And, it essentially gave a private right of action to private citizens file suit. Essentially, it's a big brother type approach. And so you can absolutely expect for companies who intend to propel ahead and enact and or adopt those policies to provide health care that would include abortion, then the cost to travel, you can expect that there's going to be legal challenges to those companies. And it has such a chilling effect because then it becomes, is it a civil penalty? Is it a criminal penalty? And it goes just beyond the company, but is it the HR department, the men and women who work in HR who are receiving the request? Do they have to delve into the woman's medical history? Is she going for cancer treatments or is she going for an abortion? So then it becomes, are you subjecting your employees to civil and or criminal action? So I think that the companies were quick to react to the outpour and the outrage that was obviously being received, but I don't think that they will actually be able to take on this issue without subjecting their own employees to civil and or criminal penalties.
Davis Rankin, you have a question?
Could you explain who's making the threats and what are they threatening? And then how do they don't have the power to do that, do they? State can't.
Hold. I was about to say, we need to clarify, Davis, if this is state or federal that you're concerned about.
I don't understand how the state of Texas can punish somebody, punish a company, private or public, for what it does, or criminalize that behavior in this context. I don't see. Maybe they're letting their their hippopotamus mouth overload their hummingbird behinds.
Well, I really think that it's, who would have thought that there would ever be a law giving an individual a private right of action against a provider who's providing medically protected services at that time to an individual. So I don't have the individual names, but I was just reading in CNN Politics that they indicated that there were 14 GOPs who've come together that says, listen, companies, you're going to get penalized. And so it didn't say if it's a civil penalty, if it's a criminal. When you give the power to the states, we are subjected to what the legislature will enact.
You think they can do that? That just doesn't seem right to me that they can do that, that they would do that.
What does it seem right?
Regardless of one's view of abortion, I don't think the government, I'll just say it and you can play off of that. I don't think the government has any role or right to punish companies that don't do what they want them to do in this circumstance. That makes sense?
Well, so if you don't at an individual, at the individual female, right? What are they expecting to get, right? A pound of flesh. So what was their, it's the same logical or line of reasoning when they enacted the private right of action for a private citizen to bring civil litigation against providers of the service, not against the woman who would choose to have the abortion, but against a medical provider. And all it is designed to do is to create a chilling effect, meaning no one's going to touch it because they're going to be afraid of civil or criminal penalties. That's, what medical provider would make the decision to abort a child or a fetus, or whether it's viable, whatever gestational age that it may have been, who's going to touch that when they themselves could have been subjected to suit? It's hitting their pocketbooks, and that's what it was designed to do. And it's the same thing with the corporate policy. It's just that chilling effect, and they're going to go after, they're going to target one particular company, and they're going to go after that company blazing. And whether, like I said, within that company, who makes those decisions as to who's going to pay? The woman is going to have to submit that she is getting a medical procedure out of state to be eligible for it to be covered. And when she does that, do they then have to distinguish, because of the laws that are going into effect in the state of Texas, what type of procedure is it? And when you do that, a woman's medical health, a man's medical health, we're all protected under HIPAA. An employer does not have a right to know about my medical history. But they will, given the scrutiny that they're going to have to apply here in making the decisions as to whether the company's going to take the risk or not.
Joining us on 710 KURV is Sandra Spurgeon from the Spurgeon Law Firm. And this got complicated really, really quickly. Like it wasn't such an easy thing. Like, hey, the pro-life won, life wins today, and then it suddenly turns into, okay, so who do we sue and when, and what are the procedures? And if I happen to take, because I got some notes from some friends of mine over the weekend that certain employers had passed out memos saying, hey, listen, if you want to take a trip out of the state for a medical thing, we're totally willing to reimburse the travel expenses for that. And is that like specifically for the travel expenses, like, hey, is that an HR thing? They're going to dip into petty cash and just hand it over and be like, hey, everything's cool. Everything's all peachy keen. Who's first in line to take that hit when the legal things come in? And you brought up HIPAA too, which I was waiting for that to come up.
Well, HIPAA trumps what the state of Texas wants to do, doesn't it?
Well, but not if the woman has to. So let me go back just a second.
Yeah.
So most major corporations are self-insured, right? They may have a third-party administrator, but they apportion a percentage of their profits to care or to provide or fund for the health care of their employees. Okay, so that's so whether there's insurance involved or not, some companies, most of these larger companies, they're self-insured. So you are correct that HIPAA would prevail, or would, as you would say, trump. I think we don't want to use that word at this point. But,
I'm sorry. I never thought of that.
But so in the Hobby Lobby case that went in front of the U.S. Supreme Court a few years ago, there was a decision that Hobby Lobby could not be forced. It's a U.S. Supreme Court decision. They could not be forced to pay for a woman's contraception. All right. So companies can't be forced to pay for the abortion costs of a woman. And they absolutely, if they're presented with a pre-request for payment or an itemization request for payment, they absolutely have a right to know what that's for. And so when they do, that's when they then come under the microscope of the state. So yeah,
Maybe I
it
should
is
have gone to law
very,
school.
and my goal is just to, is to
Yeah.
spread the word that this is so complicated. Like Friday night, I gave an interview at 11 o'clock at night to
Wow.
iHeartRadio in Cincinnati. So at that point in time, in Ohio, I could have had that medical procedure performed if I wanted. However, if I had stepped my toe into Kentucky, which is borders Kentucky, I could be prosecuted for it.
It is
same
incredible.
night. And so my position is that, look, I'm not here to make a moral or ethical statement about all of this. My point is that the inequality that we are seeing in every scenario here, when you sit down and you rationally and you logically take someone who knows these steps and who knows the ins and outs of insurance and who understands the legal implications of a state having a jurisdictional issues over a woman and the equality that happens when you're in a different state, it just creates an entire debacle that is going to take time to flush out.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and it does not seem to be an area in which people can speak about it with a level head, right? And I don't mean you. I mean, I have been flooded with calls from family and from friends who, one side or the other, just because they know I'm speaking on this issue, they want to blow me up without me saying a word. And I'm saying,
trust
but you understand
me,
that's not my role?
Yeah, no, we know, because that's the whole point of the conversation is to just talk about
Thank you,
this,
ma'am.
X, Y, and Z is going on. We're not taking one side or another, but this is what's happening. Thanks a lot, Sandra Spurgeon for the Spurgeon Law Group, joining us on News Talk 710 KURV.